Howdy guys, Rex here. This is actually a video response to one of James Yeager's recent videos where he asked some questions about the proper setup of a .338 Lapua Magnum. If you follow his channel, last week he got a new rifle set up. I believe it was a Savage .338 Lapua Magnum, one of the BA rifles. And he's got a nice long-range configured optic for it. I believe it was a Bushnell, and it looked like it was properly configured for long-range shooting, so he's got the right equipment, but he had some questions on zeroing and proper setup, and actually requested that someone would maybe post a video response or put a link on there answering some of those questions to get started on one of those .338 Lapua Magnums. So I got a little bit of time with the .338 Lapua Magnum. I got some shooting, you know, for those of you who follow my channel, that's kind of my shtick, that's my forte, right? And so I got a couple different witnesses here, some different rifles. This is actually a smaller caliber. This is a big Super Magnum and a different cartridge, and this is my .338, the old Pushka, the smoke pole here. So we'll discuss real quick here some of the, just to get a concise answer from Mr. Yeager on his zeroing question. Then we'll discuss some other things that I think are important, especially for getting set up initially. And hopefully this video is found to be useful for viewers on both sides, because we're all in the same shooting community here in the United States. So here we go. And we'll try to keep it as concise as possible. For more detail, you can watch the entire series, but that's like hundreds of hours, and that's pretty long. So we'll keep it kind of concise. But the first question he had is, what range are you going to zero your scope for long-range shooting? That's a good question. I would recommend like 100 yards, okay? And there's a few reasons for that. Reason number one, if it doesn't seem like it's far enough, it actually is, because we got to remember we have our turret up here. So if you're shooting at 1,000, you just crank her up to whatever your firing solution is. Now you're zeroed exactly for 1,000. If you're shooting at 680, you crank her back down, and you're going to be indexing your optic for the exact firing solution for the distance you're going to be shooting at. So really you're going to zero the rifle at exactly the range where the target is. But as your base range, which is what I believe he was asking, a good base range in my opinion would be 100 meters or yards, or whatever you prefer, whatever you're most familiar with, whatever your range is set up at. And the reason for that is if you zero too far, wind starts to become a factor, and it might throw off your zero a little bit, okay? So if you stay inside 100, it really cuts down and mitigates some of those potential problems with having the wind throw off your zero just a little bit. So at 100, wind is not going to be a factor, and you'll eliminate that whole deal from that equation. If you're trying to guess at 1,000 why it missed to the right or to the left, you don't have to wonder if your zero was goofy from the wind, okay? So that's the distance where I would zero even a long-range .338 Lapua Magnum that you plan on shooting maybe a mile, 1,700, 1,800 yards or whatever, or even 2K, if you're going to push it that far. There are some considerations when you're talking about scope mounting and configuration, how to get it set up. I suppose the first consideration, well, let's talk about equipment real quick here, is I wouldn't be scared to mount the scope too high on a rifle like this, and there's a few reasons for that, okay? As you can see, this rifle here, we got this optic mounted pretty darn high. These are some really tall Trijicon rings that I got here for this 35mm scope. And some folks would kind of think that's a little goofy of a setup. Well, this isn't really a deer hunting rifle where you're not going to have the ability to adjust your firing solution precisely, where you want your bore axis and your scope to be kind of close together so you don't have to account for it as much on a deer rifle. But on a precision rifle like this with the scope set up the way it is, you simply index in for your firing solution. All that stuff is mathematically predetermined on your charts. So that's not going to be an issue of the scope being higher in terms of ballistics, okay? It's not going to be a bad deal. But what it will do for you is it'll cause you to kind of have to get a little higher with your cheek piece, right? Because you got to get a little higher then to get behind the scope. You're not going to be cocking your head all the way down. Plus, this is a recoil thing, guys. If you look at the butt pad here on this rifle, the way it's set up, this butt pad is adjusted really high, almost as high as it can go. This cheek piece is adjusted high enough so I can get behind this really high scope. So what we have is the axis of the bore here is pretty much centered on the center of this butt pad. And what that does for a guy, when you're shooting a large Magnum like this, when you're laying down prone and you want to spot your bullet trace on its way down to the target so that you can see where you're hitting, Sometimes you don't have the luxury of a spotter, or sometimes you don't have the luxury of an experienced spotter, and you might be the best spotter there is. So you want to watch your own bullet trace. So ideally, you want the rifle not to kind of have that muzzle flip, that kick upwards, right? You want it just to be able to push straight back into you. So if you configure your rifle in a manner like this, where the scope's mounted pretty high and you can get this centered with the bore axis, it's going to really reduce and almost eliminate your muzzle flip. And there are some chassis designs that are more conducive to getting everything set up that way. This is a Mirage ULR chassis, and we'll review that after a while here sometime. So that's a consideration. So don't be scared of having your scope mounted a little bit high. That's a good thing, actually. Some things to consider when mounting your optic in terms of how far forward or backward should you have it. I would recommend getting that set up when you're laying down prone, because most likely you're going to employ this rifle in the field laying down prone. Especially if you're doing long-range precision shooting, that's by far the most stable position you're going to have, is laying down perfectly still prone. You're going to have artificial support in the front, a bipod, and you're going to probably have a sandbag propped up underneath the toe of your rifle, and you're going to use your hand, your left hand, to kind of manipulate that toe support sandbag so you can get really steady. So when you're laying down prone, it's going to be slightly different than if you're just standing offhand like this. When you're laying down prone, your face is going to get closer to that optic. So you want to take that in consideration when you're mounting this optic. So lay down prone, have the optic a little bit loose inside the ring so you can move it back and forth before you clamp her down, right? And move it as far forward as you can get before you lose the sharpness of the periphery of the image. You know what I'm saying? So like if you move it so far forward you start to get the tunnel vision or the blurriness, that's too far forward. Just mount it just far back enough to where you get that clear image when you're laying down prone with your face up in that cheek weld up against that in that eye box area there. And that'll give you the most eye relief for laying down prone. So take that into consideration as well. Another thing to consider too is if you are still going to choose your base, a lot of rifles like that Savage, if I remember correctly, comes with a canted base. It's tilted up a little bit. And they come with a 20-minute cant or a 30-minute cant sometimes. That's basically just ramping up the back of your scope 20 or 30 minutes. It'll give you that much of a boost. Because you only have sometimes limited range of adjustment inside your optic in terms of how far your turret can adjust up and down. So that can sometimes limit your range. And on a big cartridge like a 338 Lapua Magnum, if you're trying to push a mile or 2K, you might run out of adjustment on your scope. So that cant will give you another 20-minute boost or a 30-minute boost. So that's a good thing to have too as well, is a canted scope base. And most of those long-range rifles are kind of equipped that way. So that's just another thing to remember as well. Now in terms of establishing the zero, when you are zeroing this rifle, I would strongly recommend zeroing it from a position that's going to be similar to how you're going to employ it in the field. There are subtle harmonic things that come into play if you're shooting off a bench, or if this bipod is resting like on a concrete shooting bench or something. It's going to vibrate differently than if it's laying on the soft dirt. So if you plan on using this in the field laying in soft dirt with the bipod and with the sandbag back here behind the toe, then that's how you want to zero it. You don't probably want to use one of those fancy range devices where you clamp the rifle in there and it locks it in, because what's going to happen is from shot to shot that thing's going to inconsistently vibrate, and it will change your point of impact sometimes, and it can even change it to enough to make a significant difference. So I always strongly recommend zeroing the rifle as you're going to use it in the field, because there's infinite idiosyncrasies that come into play there, and you might as well just eliminate all of them and not worry about it and just lay down on the ground and zero it exactly how you plan on using it. Using whatever bipod or whatever kind of support you would use in the field. If you plan on resting on a rucksack or whatever most of the time, then zero it that way. So I think that's a good thing to take into consideration as well in terms of zeroing the rifle. Another major thing, probably the biggest thing when you're talking about long-range shooting, is you want to have decent ballistic tables. A lot of folks kind of rely on electronic software, and that's all cool. You can get apps for your phone and whatnot, and there's little gadgets you can get. This is a really cool deal. This is the Accuracy First Whiz Wheel Ballistic Solver. I'm going to review that pretty soon. You can get little things to help you range your target using a reticle, your scope, mil-dot master. There's a lot of tackle you can get. Really the best tackle is probably a calculator. and you can do your range formulas using the reticle. You take the sizes of the target in inches, like if it's a 40-inch dude from head to crotch, 40 inches tall, right? If he's got saggy pants, you know, especially as maybe a little more than 40 inches. But you're going to take that distance, you're going to take it times 25.4, and then you're going to divide that by how many mils it takes up to cover that distance in your scope. And that'll give you the range in meters. And there's a different formula you can use with yards, if you prefer yards. So that's how you're going to determine your range most likely in the field, or you can use a laser rangefinder. If you got a laser rangefinder, that'll work fine too, but it's always good to know how to use the mils. So if you're going to be shooting, I think it's good to practice using the mils. There's a lot of different ways to print your charts off in your ballistic tables. I would recommend, there's a lot of stuff online. There's a million different outfits, and they all get pretty close, and that'll get you started. And what I would recommend when you're building your charts is it'll print off a deal for you. Here's some of my old ones here. And you can see you got your ranges, and I got it arranged in temperature variation for muzzle velocity variation, all this stuff. You can get as fancy as you want on your charts, and the fancier you get and the more attention to detail you have, the smaller your cone of fire is going to be, and you're going to eliminate all those variables that maybe some folks don't account for. So it's good to go as detailed as you can with your charts. Here's some new charts for the 338 Lapua Magnum here. Just kind of different setups, right, that you can have. A lot of guys try to keep it simple, and a good way to go is you can just take a real simplified version of your ballistics and apply it right to the rifle there, and increments of 100 yards or 100 meters or whatever. And it'll give you your drop data, how much you need to adjust your optic for basic 100-meter increments. And you always want at least something like that on your rifle. You can tape it on the back of your scope cap or whatever so that you don't have to get behind it. You can have all your wind hold-offs and spin drift calculations and stuff like that very readily available from laying down prone behind the rifle kind of position. So there's little tricks like that that can make it a lot more streamlined. Since if you do lose your more detailed charts that you have where it has like maybe 10-meter increments, then you still at least got something to go off of. And you can interpolate using just your brain or using a calculator the values between here. So if you're at 940 yards, you got to figure out, okay, I have data for 900 and 1,000. So you figure out what 40 more would be using interpolation. And that's not a hard deal to do. So a little pocket calculator, or if you can maintain awareness when you're excited to take a shot in real world conditions, it might be a little more difficult to do the math. So it is nice to have at least your hasty firing solutions taped on your weapon someplace. So that's a recommendation too. When you're talking about ballistic tables, we did produce a series of ballistic tables that are available for free. If you got Microsoft Excel, you put in your variables. That's the other big thing too to consider when you're talking about that, is you want to make sure all your inputs are exactly correct. Because if you get them, especially muzzle velocity, so if you put in bad data on your inputs, you're going to get bad data on your outputs. So spend a lot of time. It's okay to have OCD level attention to detail when you're setting up your ballistic tables. It's probably best to actually confirm your muzzle velocities with some kind of chronograph, because each rifle is going to handle a given set of ammo differently, because there's different frictional resistances, variations in the bore, variations in the ammo or whatever. So that it's never exactly like the box says, and the closer you can get your chart set up to reality, the better. And you do want to take into consideration all the different atmospheric variations and all that. We go into that with excruciating detail in the series if you want to watch more on that. But basically, getting your rifle set up is relatively simple to get started in long range. Zero it for 100 meters. If you got a zero stop, set it up to where it's going to stop on your way back down, so it bottoms out at 100. That's a reasonable distance to zero. Don't be shy to have your scope mounted a little higher if you have the proper cheek piece and the equipment to get properly situated behind there. And zero it like you're going to use it in the field. That's probably my top advice. And then also have at least the hasty ballistic firing solutions taped somewhere to the stock of the rifle so you have them at your disposal. Alright, so I hope this video was kind of helpful for getting at least started on setting up your 338 Lapua Magnum. Of course, we got a lot more pointers if you watch the channel or whatever. If you guys ever want to check out the Sniper 101 series, it's excruciating detail, 100 parts long, and it'll keep you busy for weeks. There's a lot of details into it, and you can zoom in forever on that stuff. It's a lot of fun. But just to get started, pretty simple. So let me know how that works out for you guys. If you have any questions, definitely put them in the box here. I'll try to look at it and we'll try to get those answered. All right, rock and roll, guys. Keep them groups tight.
But she hits me, disassembles my leg. So I went to the doctor and he gave me a leg. Now she waits, slumber, just dreaming, pretty hope that she kills instead of leaving with me. No, she's a Minefield, she pops your body from your soul. Minefield, leave a big smoking hole. Minefield, please don't beat off my leg. Minefield, I beg.